Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Cori of Coriander Quilts. This morning I released my setting instructions and layout information for my layout for Moda Blockheads. This is the layout that I plan to use. It's a 63-inch square layout and it uses 25 of the 9-inch blocks. You'll find all of the information that you need to use this setting over on my blog, so I will have that linked for you in the description box below. I have some pressing information that is really going to help you level up your piecing for these blocks, specifically this one. The focus of this video is going to be on the pressing, but I am going to walk you through a little bit how to piece together these blocks. You can see that I have cut everything out according to my pattern instructions. And the first thing we are going to be doing is making quarter square triangle blocks. You'll be using A and E for these blocks. I have marked my sewing lines on E, and I am going to take these over to my sewing machine and sew together one pair. You're going to see in a little bit why it's important that I am doing a pair of these at one time. Let me go over to my sewing machine and sew on those marked lines, and I will meet you back over here. After sewing both of the marked lines, we cut those apart, and then we press both of these to the dark fabric. We're just working our way down through the pattern to make these quarter square triangles. And then the next step after pressing is to mark those same lines, and then we're going to put these two units right sides together and sew on the marked lines. This is a very common way to make quarter square triangles. These squares are oversized, so we don't need to worry about trimming anything up just yet. We're going to go back over to the sewing machine and we're going to sew on both of those lines. I'm going to press these out, mark my second unit, and sew these two together in the same manner. So far, we are following everything exactly as the pattern shows. Now we're getting to the part where we are just going to add in a couple extra pressing instructions that are really going to streamline this pressing, as I mentioned earlier. This next step is the same. I have sewn these together and on the marked lines and then cut them apart, and now we are just pressing that seam in one direction. So let's just go ahead and do that. We need to do this. I've kept my pairs together, and that's going to matter. You'll see why in just a moment. Okay, so there is the first pair. And I'm going to hold off on these two for just a moment, and let's talk about these two. So when you have your pair, when you flip this over, I'm going to do one at a time, but what we're going to be doing is we are going to be using a technique that's called popping your seams, twisting your seams, spinning your seams. There are a number of different ways that you hear this referenced. What we want is we want all of these seams going in the same direction. So as you can see here, we are having all of these seams twisting towards the right, but when we get to this seam right here, he's going the wrong way. We want that to also be going in that direction. So we are going to just pop this over here. Sometimes they cooperate really nice and sometimes, oh, there we go. They usually work pretty good, but what we want is we want our center to look just like that. I'm gonna press it, then I'm gonna show it to you. So we are just making that seam go the other direction. So that's what it's going to look like. So now you can see we have all of our seams going to the right. Then I like to flip this over and make sure that I didn't get any overlap there from repressing, and then just give that a nice little press there. And that's what that is going to look like. So I'm going to set that one over there, and we're going to do this other block. Now, what you might notice is the seams on this block are going in the opposite direction. In this block, they are all going towards the left except for that seam. So we want that seam right there to also be going over to the left. So we are going to pop that one over. And I find if I give this a little finger press here and then go back in, just press that down. If that happens to you, just go ahead and flatten that back up and then flip it over. Make sure that your front is nice. This is easier for me to do when I have a lower ironing board. So you guys can see I have my ironing board up pretty high. It's a little bit trickier for me, but that is what you want. And so then all of these seams are now going in this direction here. Let's put the white up at the top because then you can see how different these are. If you have both of these blocks laying side by side, you'll see these are going this direction and these are going this direction. And we're going to repeat that with our other blocks, and we're gonna have the same thing. We're gonna have one block that goes this way and one block that goes this way. And we wanna pay attention to that because when we go to piece our hourglass blocks together, these quarter square triangles, this block and this block are not going to butt up. These seams are not going to nest at all. But if we keep them separate, all of our A's, the ones that are going this direction, will nest, and the ones that are going this direction will nest with each other. So I'm gonna show you that a little bit better, and I think it will make sense to you, but you just wanna keep track of which seams go which way. And it's not hard to do, you just have to think about it. So I'm gonna show you how to pop the seams again. I like to set my seams first, just like you saw me do there. And then press in one direction. Do the same thing for this one. Give them a little finger press over there. All right, let's see what the back of these look like. We'll start with this one here. All right, you can see we have these going this direction, so we want that one also going that direction. So let's pop him over there. Give that a little finger press there. I'm actually going to turn this way because it's a little bit easier for me to press it down rather than up. Flip it over. Okay, there's our first one. And when we look at the back here, we see we have them going this way, so we want that one to also go that way. Let's just switch him over. This is a little bit of a not time consuming, but it does take a little bit of extra time, but the results are going to be so nice. Flip that over, make sure everything's laying nice on the front. And there we go. Now let's take a look at the way these are running. So this one is running this direction, which matches up with the way these seams are going. And this one is going this direction, which matches up with the way these are going. So now, as I said, these blocks can be sewn together and these blocks can be sewn together, but these two, if you try to sew them together, are not going to sew together nicely. But these, I can take these, and these seams are all gonna nest for me. So when it's time to sew these together, everything is gonna butt up and nest just right. So if you just keep track of your, I'm gonna call them an A quarter square triangle and a B quarter square triangle, then they're gonna nest very nicely for you. Now we still need to trim these down to 5 inches square. We haven't done any trimming. So I just leave these on 2 separate piles, and I'm just gonna take one pair, I'll trim one pair down, and then we'll sew those together, and this unit will be all set. These blocks now need trimmed down to 5 inches square. You can use your favorite method for trimming these down. I really like the June Taylor Perfect half square triangle and quarter square triangle ruler, but it does not work for these blocks since they are not being trimmed to a 1/2 inch measurement. They're being trimmed to a 5 inch measurement. So I'll probably end up using a 5 inch square ruler for a lot of these. It's not my favorite way to trim these down, and it's probably a little bit harder because you're going in all directions. So if you are new to rotary cutting, I probably wouldn't suggest trimming it that way, but you can use whatever method you enjoy. You can also trim up using, you know, this is a, what is this, a 10.5 inch square ruler right here. You could trim using this if you wanted to. You know, you need 5 inches. The center point right here is at 2.5. That's marked in your pattern. So the 2.5 is right here, and then you have your 5 inch measurement, so you can line up and trim it using this ruler if you wanted to. And then you would trim top and bottom, flip it around, and then trim the other 2 sides. So that's also an option, and you're probably pretty familiar with however you like to trim these down, so just use whatever works best for you. I'm gonna go ahead and trim this other one down here, and then I'll talk a little bit more about finishing these off. Of course you, of course you could trim these 2 sides, pivot, and then trim again, if that was easier for you. There we go. So there we have that one. Oh, he needs a little bit of a trim right there. We have that one done. So these 2 had seams that were going in the same direction. So when we put these together, everything is going to nest like we want it to. And then we'll just sew, and we will end up with units that look like this. And I want to show you what the backs of these look like so you can see. I've pressed that final seam open, and here you can see all of our seams are going the same direction for both of these 2, and they're going in the opposite direction for both of these 2. So you end up with blocks that look identical from the front and nest perfectly. You just have to pay a little bit of attention to which direction those seams are going. Now we are going to go ahead and move on to the other block that we need for our setting. Now this one, you can just follow the pattern exactly as it shows, follow the pressing instructions exactly as it shows. You don't need to do anything differently, but I'll just give you a quick walkthrough so that you know how to piece this one as well. It's really just 2 flying geese units to start with. So you are going to need 2 B's, and then you will need 4 of the F's. You'll draw your diagonal line on each F, and then we are doing right sides together, sewing on the diagonal line, trimming out the bottom layers. So let me go ahead and get cracking on this one. I have completed the 2 flying geese units. On the back, you can see that when you follow the pressing instructions in the pattern, you'll have 1 seam going towards the center and 1 seam going away from the center. Make sure that you do that for each flying geese, because that means that when you put them together, these 2 seams are going to nest and give you a very nice finish. The next step would be to sew those 2 together, and then you are going to sew C to the top, and then you end up with this unit right here. And these are your border units. Now, I want to show you how these blocks come together around our Blockheads block. I've pulled one of my blocks here, and I'll just show you. I'm gonna lay the layout over here too so you can see that. So the borders come all the way around here. That's these right here, are going to come around the outside edges. And then the quarter square triangle units are going to come in between each of the blocks in the center of the quilt. And they just frame out these blocks so pretty. Let me straighten this up a little bit here, because I just think this is such a pretty setting. This gray that I'm using is Etchings Charcoal. It's a Moda Bella Solid. Works really nice with the Cozy Up fabrics that I'm using. Move that up a little bit yet. Try to fit most of this on screen for you guys. Not quite, but not too far off. And then you have D squares that are going to fit in between here too. So you can see how that's going to work. Frame everything out perfectly. And that's how that is. I think that's going to be such a fun setting. I hope this tutorial has helped out with some of those extra pressing steps that we can take to really ensure that our blocks are going to lay nicely. Thanks so much for stopping by. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below and I will do my best to answer those for you. And I hope to see you back here again next time.